Hi everyone, this is Courtney Butler Robinson with the Mud and the Lotus, a guide and workbook for students of yoga. And I have had a situation arise with all this craziness that's going on in our world right now. As I record this, it is March of 2020, and a lot of people are in quarantine trying to avoid getting sick. Please excuse the back of my office. I failed to realize my closet doors were open there. Anyways, I am going to be recording my book to help someone that I know in my family relearn a lot of what he learned in school with me. I no longer own a school, but I did write this book and it's selling quite well. And so I want to tell you all, thank you so much for those of you who have purchased my book and for supporting me. I'm going to go through the book over 9 sessions, and actually 10, because I'm going to do an introduction today and talk to you about the book and go through it to help you review. Either if you are a teacher, you want to teach, or you're considering teaching, or you want it for your own personal development. So let's just dive right into the overview of it, and I think that will cover everything I want to say. I'm not charging for this. It's going to be live up on YouTube. There will probably be about 10 videos over the course of the next month, and I hope that you will follow along with me. Leave your questions in the text box below the videos, and that will alert me via email, and in the following video, I will answer them. So The Mud and the Lotus, a guide and workbook for students of yoga by Courtney Denise Butler. My last name is Robinson now, but either one. I have 2 books. You can find them on Amazon or any online retailer like Walmart, Barnes & Noble. And so this book, let me give you a little bit of quick history because I believe it's relevant to you understanding my own background and how I'm going to teach you and where I come from. So I'm going to turn to the preface, if you will, and talk a little bit about my history. And also I would ask you each week after this to read what we go over today, and then the next chapter, and look at the first 4 postures in chapter 5. Each week I will go over them, or each time I get online. It may not be weekly, it may be more than that. All right, so a little bit of my background and what the book symbolizes. So the Mud and the Lotus, there is the background of the Mud and the Lotus. The history of that is that it is a inspiration, if you will, that a lotus flower often grows out in the rice fields in the east, and it comes up and it's this beautiful flower that sits on the top of this mucky, dirty, nasty water, usually out with cow dung. And it's just to remind us that, especially in a time like this, that no matter what life throws at us, no matter how ugly and dirty life feels, that something beautiful can come out of it. And I feel that is extremely important in a time like this, because we are all, once we come out of this coronavirus and we all begin to move forward, we are all going to begin to appreciate the things that we took for granted before, like going to the grocery store and picking up anything we need and it being in stock, like being able to go and visit our elders, or in my case, my job is I'm temporarily been put on leave until we reconvene, which I'm thinking could be months. So it makes you certainly appreciate things a little bit more. So you can read about this more in my book. The next thing I want to talk about is my yoga practice and how it began. And I should tell you, if you hear me stop to take a breath, I do have a heart defect that I was born with, and it affects my pulmonary system. And so sometimes I have to stop and take a breath. And so we'll just all breathe together when that happens. My yoga practice began when I was a little girl. I was an only child and I had PBS. We only had about 4 TV stations back then. And I would turn on PBS and I would practice with Lilias Falon. And so at that time, I was also a dancer. I had been put in dance as soon as I could walk, around the age 2. And it felt very much to me like dance, but it was non-competitive. I could do it at home with the TV, and that is something that I continued to do. There wasn't really a lot of yoga back in the 70s in the rural South. There wasn't really yoga studios, and they were very kind of not very popular at that time in the South and the Bible Belt. So I would just practice with the TV, and then there was a yoga class at our local Y that was more of a tone and stretch yoga inspired, and it was a really good class actually. So we would work out with weights and do our workout, and then we would do yoga practice. And it was a bunch of senior citizens, and I was 15 at the time, and I got permission to join that class. And so that was my introduction to asana practice. But at the age of 13, I had a bit of a hippie aunt who took me to Alateen and gave me a book called The Dragon Doesn't Live Here Anymore by Alan Cohen. And that was my introduction to meditation. I did not connect the two until I was 18. But from 13 on, I have been a meditator, and I have used what I've learned in those books, and I would go to the library and get cassette tapes and listen to meditation. So that has been how I got started. At 18, I worked for a company called Aveda Hair Care, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And part of our training, we had to go off and live in this big house near New Orleans. And I worked for a distributor out of the South. And we had to be on macrobiotic diets. And I don't know if they were Ayurvedic or macrobiotic, but they were similar. And we had to learn all about essential oils and Ayurveda. And we also had to practice yoga and meditation. My family thought I had joined a cult, and it was a little weird at the time. Not so much that part wasn't weird to me. There was some other things, like they wanted us to all dress alike and cut our hair and blah, 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 blah. But anyway, I did work for them for a while, and that is where I connected the yoga as therapy and Ayurveda and meditation and asana together. And when that hit for me, it was like a door had been open. I had gotten pregnant and had to move home. So I came back home and quit working for Aveda, and I went and I lost that baby, but I went and learned more about yoga. So I had to go to like the local bookstore, the local hippie bookstore, if you will, kind of the fringy bookstore, and I got some VHS tapes and some books, and I started getting my hands on everything I could on yoga and studying and reading. I found a book at a garage sale called the Yoga, Youth, and Reincarnation, and I read that, and that's how I really learned about the practice and the history, and it was great. And I would get tea boxes off of Yogi Tea, and I would write letters, and I would have like yoga videos sent to me. So I practiced yoga through my subsequent three pregnancies, and in about 12 years later, when I was 30, I had gotten my degree in early childhood education and facility management or business, and I was working in that field, and I was getting sick all the time, and I got really, really sick to the point that I was having to try to get on disability. I was so ill, and that is where I met a really good doctor who gave me some good advice on self-care, and I followed it, and I upped my yoga practice. And yoga was one of the tools in my toolbox that I felt like healed me. And so I'm not saying it was the panacea. It was a lot of things that I did, but I used yoga to heal me. And so at that time, I decided I wanted to become a yoga teacher. I'll be 50 this year. So that was in September of this year. It will have been 20 years that I've been teaching. I was about 29 when I decided to teach, because there were no schools and Yoga Alliance was just new at that time, and I had 3 little babies. Going off to school was not going to happen. But I did look into schools around 91, because that's when they were starting to form and Yoga Alliance was starting to form. But I just read everything I get my hands on. You have to realize at this time I've been practicing for like 17 years of my life, or more than that actually, if you really go all the way back. So I had a very good foundation. I had attended a few classes here and there, but I had a really good foundation and a lot of self-taught knowledge. And I started studying people like Eric Schiffman, Rodney Yee. They were teachers back then, Lilias Valon, and really studying up on how they taught, their verbiage. And that is how I started teaching. I started teaching in a local community college, continuing education. I would end up getting hired by the health science department, and I was there for 10 years. in 2003, I did find a school and I wanted to learn more. I wanted to have hands-on learning, and I'm so glad I did. There was a lot that I knew. Actually, I was probably the most advanced student on knowledge in that class. However, and there were some other people who were self-taught because that was just kind of normal, or it had been handed down back in that day. But there was a lot of information that was solidified for me, and a lot of history that I didn't know, and philosophy, and more information on anatomy. So I was extremely grateful and remained in a relationship with my teacher. I don't have much contact with her now, but that's how I got started. And then over the past 20 years, I have studied with many, many great teachers. So my lineage is with Krishnamacharya, Desikachar, and so my teachers that I've had over the years have primarily come out of that lineage, and also through Alan Finger and his father. I'm going to flip over here on the third page of that. From Ishta Yoga, Kavi Yogaraj Mani Finger was his dad. I probably murdered that. And he had actually been studying and teaching with Gandhi. And so my teachings have been influenced by those people, and their teachings were influenced by Krishnamacharya, Desikachar, who is Krishnamacharya's son, Yogananda, and Gandhi. And then Krishnamacharya, if you want to go way back, studied with, and again, I'll probably murder this. See, even after 20 years of teaching and 30 plus years or 40 years of practice, my Sanskrit's a little sketchy sometimes. So Saint Ramahan Guru Maharaji was Krishnamacharya's teacher in Tibet. And eventually I would get some certifications through Larry Payne, who was the founder of IYT, the International Association of Yoga Teachers. I studied with him, Lilias Phelan, people like Judith Lassiter, who coined the term restorative yoga. And so my practice comes from a very classical place. A lot of what you see now in this vinyasa yoga trend and these fast yoga, power, sweaty yoga, that did not even exist really back when I started. Yes, there was Pattabhi Jois teaching Ashtanga yoga, but you have to realize Pattabhi came from Krishnamacharya, and when he was taught that, it's because they were youngsters in the school that they were performing. So the way that he was taught was specifically for young boys who had a gymnastic and a wrestling background. And so yoga, as I was taught it, was much more therapeutic and slow, and it was not for physical fitness, but that is a side effect of the practice. So let's back up a little bit and talk about this book and how I see it helping you. This is when I had my 200-hour program, which over all my years of teaching, not just 200, I had a children's teacher training program and a 300-hour program. I gave out 200 and, enrollment was 225 people that completed those programs. So I have a long history of teaching and training teachers. And this book is to help people build their foundation for teaching. So this is just like building a house, you put your foundation down, your walls, your roof, and then that is your foundation, right? You might even choose, like you can see behind me, we have shiplap stained walls. You might choose sheetrock or whatever. So that's kind of like your lineage. I've chosen this kind of style of yoga, which is Krishnamacharya, is my main influence. And the more classical yoga from, the early 1900s, 1800s, and the many thousands of years that had been passed down before. So that's like your foundation. Now, as you learn more and you want to explore more, maybe you're going to go into prenatal or children's yoga or yin yoga. I look at that as like the way you decorate your house. Like you have this house, but the person who goes in and decorates it, that depends on the person. And this is very much going to be how your career as a yoga teacher or your life as a yoga student is going to be. You're going to try on different things, see if they fit, and see if they suit you. But this book will give you your foundation, your roof, and the solid walls to teach an educated class and to have a life long knowledge of how to take care of yourself mentally, physically, emotionally. So let's see. The reason I wrote the book was in 2008, I opened my school, and you can read about that in the book. I had no intentions of opening a school. It was actually just a snap moment. I had been teaching for 7 years when I made the decision to open. I loved teaching. I taught about 3 to 5 classes a week. I was happy. It worked with my children's schedule. I had no desire to be an ERYT. That actually didn't even exist. You were either 500 or 200. So I taught for 7 years as a 200. ERYT came out around 2007. I qualified. I signed up, and that qualified me to teach a school at that time. I had taken a break. I actually had gotten quite sick of yoga and the yoga community, some of the things I was seeing that I didn't feel like represented the yamas and niyamas. And I decided to take a break. I took a 3-month sabbatical, and during that time, I decided that what I would really like to do is teach teachers in the lineage that I had learned, and it was literally like that. I remember the moment I was walking around the block and I came to a stop sign, and it was if God, the universe, the voice inside of me said, "You're supposed to teach teachers," and that was it. The flip, it was switched, was on, and I went for it. And so anyways, it took me about 9 months to write the curriculum. I ended up getting permission from my teacher to teach her curriculum, which I did for a while, and then ended up turning that and everything I learned over the subsequent years into this book, because all of it just didn't fit anymore as yoga was growing and changing. Alrighty, so this book alone does not qualify one to teach. I highly recommend you find someone who is a few steps ahead of you. If you're going through teacher training, your teacher may have had a different lineage of me. There are more than one way to do things. So if I tell you something in this book and you have a teacher that's told you to do something different, here's what I would recommend. Try it on. Try both ways. See what works best for your body, and know that there are always options. So what works for one body type may not work for another body type, and see what feels right for you. We are not all alike. There are multiple ways to do things. So don't get stuck in being inflexible, that the way that you learn something is the only way, and use your common sense. Some things just are. The yamas and the niyamas, they are what they are. I mean, you can interpret them just like people interpret the Bible different ways, but they are what they are. The 8 limbs are going to stay the 8 limbs. The kleshas, the reasons we suffer, the koshas, the different levels of the body, or the Panchamaya model. But the way it's interpreted might be different from teacher to teacher. So just know that as you're reading through this. By the way, I now work as a medical yoga therapist. I work for the Dr. Dean Ornish program in intensive cardiac rehab. And lately I've been doing cancer recovery, which I have done my whole career, but in a medical setting now. I sometimes go and speak. Recently I've been speaking at the local medical school in the Department of Pharmacology. I've gone and I've been a speaker at MD Anderson on cardiology and cancer. Those are the 2 areas that I focus, but I have a very broad knowledge in health issues of the body because I've seen so much. So sciatica, glaucoma, diabetes, high blood pressure, back problems, you name it, scoliosis, developmental disability. So I've got a pretty broad background and a degree in early childhood when it comes to children. So any questions you have, feel free to text me, even if they're not or send me in the text box, even if they're not particularly what we are doing at that time. So next time I come on here, I will be meeting you all to start on page 1 of the overview section. So if you would read that, they're really short. Each chapter, I timed it one time. It took me 20 to 30 minutes to read a chapter. And then I want you, after you read a chapter, if you want to increase your knowledge learning, go on to the back to the workbook and answer the questions, because I'll be teaching from there probably. And that is going to help you solidify that knowledge in your head. when I was in college, I took a class called Study Skills. They don't have it anymore. It was the freaking best class ever. And it taught me so much. And so what I would do, and that was an inspiration for writing this book, is I would go and I would pull up the workbook and I would do the workbook as I read it. I would fill in the blank. And that helps kind of lay that pattern down in your mind so you remember it. So it really helps to do it that way. And then if you are in the workbook, each posture has a page. It's so like if you're going to start in chapter 5 on 160 in this book, there has been one rewrite of this book, so it depends on the version you have. But on 160, easy seated posture, I want you to do the first 4, and you're just going to go to it. You're going to look up the Sanskrit word, the type of posture. Is it seated? Is it standing? What is it? The benefits, and you don't have to write everything. This is for you. It's not for me. So if you just want to write the benefits to an easy seated posture, is it's grounding. It helps open the hips and lengthen the spine. You don't have to write a paragraph. Just write what will help you remember it, like Cliff Notes version. And you don't have to fill the whole thing out. Just fill out what you know, because I'm going to go over it with you. For instance, the chakras. So it's probably, you're probably going to figure out quickly it's the root chakra, but it's in your notes. And even if you don't understand chakras, as you do that, it took me forever to understand chakras. And then I kind of got it. If you think about the way we process and feel things in our body, that is the chakras, basically. I mean, I'll go deeper into all that. So anyway, just do that as you're going along. And I am still learning how to turn off these blasted notifications for everything on this MacBook Air. So yeah, go over all of that. And when we meet again, we will cover it. And I'm going to try to keep each video under an hour. So bear with me. I am not super great at technology, and I'm using this new MacBook Air, and there is definitely a learning curve. All right, till we meet again. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. And if you press subscribe on YouTube and hit the notifications button, you'll get notified when there is a new video. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.